I stared at my reflection in the restroom mirror of the wedding venue's parking lot. The humid Savannah air had already undone the half-up hairstyle I'd struggled to do myself that morning. My cheeks were flushed, not with excitement, but with the weight of being me. My dress, a lavender chiffon thing that clung in the wrong places, made me look more like a decorative curtain than a bridesmaid. But this was what was chosen for me. All of it. The roll, the dress, even the seat at the far end of the bridal party stable. I had told Claire, the bride, my childhood friend, that I wasn't sure I could handle being part of her big day, not with how things had been lately, not with the way I'd been feeling invisible at best, ridiculous at worst, but Claire, bless. Her forever sunshine heart just smiled and said, "Savannah, people need to see you. You don't know how rare your soul is. People didn't see me. They stared through me, or worse, they saw just enough to judge as I opened the door to the grand hall, the cool blast of air conditioning wrapped around me like a cold shoulder. Glittering chandeliers hung above elegant people who looked like they belonged in magazines. I stepped inside and immediately felt like a typo in a love letter. Heads turned, not many, but just enough. A pair of girls near the dessert table stifled giggles behind champagne flutes. One whispered something that made the other glance at me, then chuckle. I wasn't naive. I knew that look, the one people give when they see a square peg shoved into a diamond-shaped room. I clutched my clutch tighter and walked slower, as if delaying the inevitable made me somehow blend in better. My heels clicked too loud on the polished floor, my stomach curled. I found a spot near the far wall beneath, a painting of Alia Fields, my gaze fixed on the petals in the frame, instead of the people. They looked soft and still, the opposite of how I felt. I told myself to stay for an hour, just long enough to not be rude. Then I could disappear again like I always did. What people didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I hadn't always been this way. There was a time when my laugh filled rooms, when I danced barefoot in the rain, when I believed in second chances, but life has a way of scraping that version of you until it barely glimmers, and in the process of surviving, I had shrunk myself to fit behind walls. But in that very moment, just as I was convincing myself to smile politely and melt into the wallpaper, I felt it, a gaze not heavy, not mocking, just present and still across the room. Near the bar stood a man who didn't look like he belonged in a fairy tale, but rather like he could rewrite one sharp suit, golden brown hair with a messy curl above his brow and eyes that didn't flinch. When they met mine, he wasn't smiling, but he also wasn't looking away. That's when it started, the tiny crack in the wall I had built for years, a flicker of confusion, curiosity and fear, because no one ever looked at me like that. I tried not to look, again. But every few minutes my eyes betrayed me, flicking toward him like a compass that refused to point anywhere else. I told myself I was imagining things, that his gaze just happened to cross mine, that it wasn't personal, but deep down, something in me knew it was personal. I didn't know his name. He wasn't part of the groom's family. That I was sure of, Claire had said something about a friend from Boston flying in last minute, a colleague, maybe an architect or designer or something creative. Like that, all I knew was that his presence filled space differently, like someone who had long outgrown shallow conversations and preferred silences that meant something. At one point, I caught him murmuring something to a man beside him. His friend looked my way and raised his brows. They exchanged a glance. That's when I knew it wasn't in my head. He had noticed me. I hated how much that shook me, because after so many years learning to walk quietly, to take up as little emotional real estate as possible, the idea of being noticed felt dangerous, like stepping barefoot on glass. I turned my back to him and pretended to admire the flower arrangements, hydrangeas and leaves over the top and expensive. I reached out and touched a petal as if it could anchor me, but my fingers trembled. The penis switched to a slower tune, the kind that makes people rise from their seats and drift into each other's arms like it's second nature. And then, just when I had decided, I couldn't bear one more second of pretending I heard the voice. I hope I'm not interrupting anything too deep. I turned. He stood just inches from, now tall and still, with a soft confidence that didn't need to announce itself. His voice wasn't loud. It was rich, smooth, like something you hear in an airport lounge or on a jazz record late at night. No, I said almost too fast. I was just looking. He smiled gently at the flowers, at the illusion of belonging, I wanted to say. But I nodded. He looked at the bouquet, then at me. You don't look Like you're just looking. You look like you're waiting for what? He tilted his head for someone to say the right thing. Maybe I blinked. No one had ever said that to me. No one had ever come that close to the truth. I managed to breathe out. And do you think you're that someone? He grinned. Not cocky warm. Only one way to find out, that's when he extended his hand. Would you dance with me? Everything inside me said no. Not because I didn't want to, but because I did, and that terrified me. You don't have to ask me just because I'm the only one left standing alone. I whispered. Not meeting. His eyes, I'm asking, he replied. Because you're the only one here who seems real, that word again, real. It clung to my skin like perfume. I didn't know I was. Wearing, I hesitated, then placed my hand in his. His fingers were steady, warm, no pity in his touch, no pressure, just presence. We walked slowly toward the dance floor. My heart that thudded so hard I wondered if he could feel it through my palm. People watched. I could feel the murmurs swell like waves around us, but he didn't flinch. Didn't look away. His focus was only on me. I'm Jason, by the way, he said as he placed his hand on my waist. Savannah. That's a beautiful name. I looked up. That's a beautiful lie. His ease softened. No, it fits you. The music wrapped around us and we moved not gracefully. But honestly, I hadn't danced in years. Not like this. Not like I mattered. You're good at this. I said. He smiled. You're good at hiding. I froze, headed gently. But you don't need to. Not with me. And right there in the middle of crystal chandeliers and artificial laughs, I felt something shift. Not because someone liked me, but because someone saw me and didn't look away. Before we go on, I want to ask you something. If you've ever felt out of place at a party, if you've ever stood by the wall pretending to look busy, just to avoid being seen, I want you to comment. I've been there too. Let's make this space feel like what Savannah needed, a place where no one has. To shrink to be accepted. And hey, if this story has touched you so far, why not subscribe to the channel, not out of obligation, but because maybe you want to see how this love story unfolds. Go ahead, I'm watching for your comment. You're part of this now. We kept dancing, and for a moment I forgot where I was. It didn't matter that the music was formal or that the room was full of people whispering behind crystal glasses. What mattered was that someone's eyes weren't scanning me for flaws. They were listening without me having to speak. Jason's hand didn't grip or guide too tightly. He simply matched my pace like he'd been waiting his whole life to learn my rhythm. His touch wasn't possessive. It was respectful. Like he understood what it meant to hold something breakable and not want to break it. You're quiet, he said after a moment. I've learned not to fill space just because it's empty. He nodded slowly like someone who knew the weight of silences. Is it okay if I ask why? You seemed so sad earlier. I hesitated then. Answered honestly because this kind of place never feels like it was made for someone like me. I'm not polished or perfect. I'm not effortless. I don't know how to be elegant in the way that floats through rooms like perfume. He didn't flinch, didn't disagree out of kindness. He just said, maybe that's what makes you extraordinary. I laughed softly, dryly. Extraordinary me? He leaned in slightly. Yes, because you're not trying to be anyone else. You're standing in a room full of mirrors and still showing up as yourself. That takes guts. I looked away, the compliment too big. To wear? I'm used to being background. I admitted. The girl who holds the bride's dress while she glows, the one they crop out of photos. He studied me for a second, and then he said the sentence that would echo in my memory for weeks afterward. You're not background, he said softly. You're the quiet part of the story that stays with people after the credits roll. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever called me unforgettable, not for anything real, not for the parts of me I didn't try to polish or fix. Swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered, why are you saying these things to me? Because you need to hear them, he said, and because I mean every word. We stood still in the middle of the song, just swaying, not because we had to impress anyone, not because it was the right beat, but because we'd found a moment that didn't ask us to be anything but honest. I didn't come here expecting to talk to anyone. I said least of all someone who sees through everything I try to hide. He didn't smile this time. He just held my gaze and said, neither did I, but here we are. And something in the way he said it made my chest warm, in a way I hadn't felt in years, Not butterflies, not excitement. Something deeper peace it was then that I told him the sentence that somehow changed the way he looked at me. Forever, I'm not afraid of being unseen anymore, I said. I'm just afraid that if someone finally sees me, they'll walk away. He let out a quiet breath. I've walked away from many things, but I don't walk away from truth. And Savannah, you're the most honest thing I've met in years. That's when I knew it wasn't just how he looked at me. It was how he listened when no one else had ever cared to. It was how his eyes didn't drift away when I said something raw. It was how he wasn't trying to rescue me just to stand beside me. The song ended, but he didn't let go of my hand, and I didn't pull away because for the first time in so long someone made me feel like I wasn't someone to be tolerated, but chosen, without sparkle, without strategy, without trying, chosen for my stillness, for my words, for who I was, and not who I pretended to be. Jason glanced around, noticing the stares still lingering. He leaned closer and said, almost like a secret, let them wonder, let them whisper they've never had to fight to feel enough. I swallowed hard. Sometimes I think I wasn't built for rooms like this. His hand tightened just slightly around mine. Maybe rooms like this weren't built for people who feel as deeply as you do. I looked up, and what makes you think I feel anything? Deeply, he smiled a little. Broken a little, tender, because no one hides this well unless they've been hurt in ways most people wouldn't survive. The words settled in my chest like warm tea after a bitter storm. He didn't ask me for details. He didn't need them. There was something sacred in the way. He just knew. I'm sorry, I murmured. For what? For being complicated? Jason chuckled, gently, brushing his thumb against the back of my hand. I'm not here for easy. I'm here for real. And in that moment, simple, unadorned. I knew he meant it, every word. Every look, every pause between us was a choice. You talk like you've read 1,000 novels and decided to become one, I said, blinking back the sting in my eyes. He laughed, softly. Maybe. Or maybe I just waited. Long enough to find a story worth becoming part of. The air outside was cooler then. I remembered crisp, with a whisper of magnolia blooms lingering from the trees that lined the stone pathway behind the venue. I didn't realize how much I'd been holding my breath until the doors closed behind us and the music faded into a low hum. Jason didn't say anything at first. He just walked beside me, matching my slow, unsure steps. I held my clutch tighter than I needed to, like it might guard my heart, but my fingers were shaking, and he noticed. You're not cold, he said gently. You're scared. I didn't deny it. What was the point? Do you want me to walk away? He asked, stopping beneath one of the hanging lanterns that cast a soft glow over the cobblestones. No, I answered more quickly than I meant to, then softer. I just don't know how to do this. He nodded. You don't have to. There's no script. I hesitated. That's what scares me. He didn't push, just waited. I looked up at the stars blurred by the haze in my eyes and let the words come without dressing them up. There was someone. Once I thought he saw me. I thought he meant it when he said I mattered. And when he left, it wasn't just him walking away. It felt like proof that I wasn't worth staying for. Jason's expression didn't change. No shock, no pity, just stillness, like he was letting the weight of my words land without trying to carry them for me. I'm sorry that happened to you, he said. Turned to him, voice barely above a whisper. Are you going to be like him? He didn't flinch. No. How can you know that? Because I'm still here, he said, and I'm not asking anything of you except what you're willing to give. That stopped me, the kindness in it. Not the kind that asks for applause, but the quiet kind that holds space without rushing. I don't know how to trust that. Yet I admitted, then I'll wait until you do. I blinked. You'd wait. Jason took a small step forward, leaving just enough space between us for my heartbeat to panic and settle at the same time. I've waited for a lot of things in life, a job that didn't drain me, a city that felt like home, but none of it felt like this. None of it felt like finding someone who says things that stay with you long after they leave the room. His words did something to me, something dangerous and beautiful. At once they melted years of quiet ache in places I didn't even realize were frozen. I sat down on a stone bench beneath the oldest magnolia tree in the garden. The petals above us swayed gently in the wind, dropping one onto my lap like a soft reminder that fragile things still hold beauty. Jason followed, careful not to crowd me for a long while. We sat in silence, but not the awkward kind, the kind that felt like breath, like rest, like maybe I didn't have to be anyone else. But this version of me, raw quiet, scared and still, somehow worthy of being seen. He picked up a fallen petal from the ground and held it in his palm. Do you see this? I nodded, still soft, still, whole even after falling. I looked at him. That's poetic. He smiled but didn't break eye contact. That's you, the tears I'd fought all night finally broke free. Not heavy sobs, just quiet. Release a few silent streams running down my cheeks while I sat still, letting someone see he didn't reach to wipe them. He didn't say, "Don't cry." He just sat beside me, letting me be whatever I needed to be in that moment. And then, as if speaking into a place deeper than skin, he said, "You've carried your hurt like armor, but maybe you don't need to protect yourself from me." I closed my eyes. No one had ever said that to me. No one had ever asked me to put my guard down, and meant it as gently as a whisper under trees. After a while, I asked, "Why me?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because you make me want to speak slower, to stay longer. Because your silence says more than most people's speeches. And because you make me remember that honesty doesn't need makeup." I laughed through my tears. "That sounds like a line?" He leaned closer. Voice warm maybe, but it's also my truth. I don't know. How long? We sat there 10 minutes, an hour. Time stopped measuring itself, but I do know that when I stood up, my heart felt lighter. Not healed. Not whole. But breathing again, before we walked back toward the venue, he gently took my hand again. "Can I see you again?" I looked down at our fingers. "I'm not good at being pursued." "Good," he said, smiling. "I'm not here to chase, I'm here to walk with you." Jason leaned against the stone edge of the fountain, watching me more than the water, but not in that intense way that makes you shrink. His gaze felt warm, like a sweater on. A chilly night. I wasn't used to that. Most people either tried too hard or didn't try at all, but he had mastered the rare art of being there without making me feel small. I used to come to places like this when I needed to think, I said, quietly surprised. By my own honesty, not this exact spot, but fountains, parks, back porches with creaky swings anywhere. The world felt slower than my thoughts. Jason nodded. "That's probably why I like being around you. You slow things down in a good way." I gave him a sideways glance, or maybe I just don't know how to keep up. He shook his head. "No, you move at your own pace. That's rare and kind of beautiful." I turned to the water again, feeling it twist, something in me, the version of myself that had learned to walk on eggshells. She didn't quite know what to do with this kind of softness. There was a time I believed in big love. I confessed, the kind they write songs about. I had my heart wide open, but then life rearranged that belief. Jason didn't interrupt. He just listened. And that more than any reply made me feel like maybe I could keep talking. I don't even know if it was one person or a series of little disappointments that did it. I continued, but at some point I just stopped showing people the parts of me that still believed in anything. He looked at me like I'd just revealed the plot twist of a novel he hadn't finished reading yet. "But you still showed up tonight." I let out a dry laugh. "I almost didn't, but you did," he said. "And that means you haven't given up. Even if you think you have." I shook my head, trying not to let the truth of that land too hard. It's easier to keep people at a distance than to risk being misunderstood. "Again, maybe," he said, "but I'm not trying to decode you. I'm just trying to walk beside you while you figure it out." That sentence, that gentle offer, it cracked something in me, not in a painful way. In the way sunlight eventually finds its way through closed curtains. I'm still scared. I admitted, not just a view of me, of how I start to feel things and then question if I'm just imagining it. "You're not," he said simply. "You're feeling it because it's real. I feel it too." That's when I looked at him, really looked, and saw that he wasn't playing a part. He wasn't here for a rescue fantasy, or because I was some mystery to solve. He was here because something in me felt familiar to something in him, and neither of us needed to explain it. I found myself stepping a little closer, not because Thestry demanded a romantic moment, but because my soul did. I wanted to feel his presence, not just beside me, but with me, and he didn't move away, if anything. He grounded me more. You make it hard. To keep my walls up, I whispered. Then let them come down, he said, when you're ready. Not because you owe me anything, but because you deserve to live without them. And maybe for the first time, I believed that was possible, not because everything had suddenly become perfect, or because someone said all the right words, but because this strange, unpredictable night had given me something more valuable than promises. It had given me permission to feel, to speak, to stay, to try again. He walked me back to my car, not rushing, not saying much, just the comfortable silence of two people holding the same moment without squeezing it too tight. When we reached my car door, I turned to him and said, "You're not like anyone I've met before." He tilted his head. "Is that good or bad?" "It's terrifying," I said, "but in the way that makes you want to keep going." His smile was quiet. "Then let's keep going." He didn't ask to kiss me. He didn't reach for me. He just stood there steady, letting me make the choice, and that meant everything. I got into my car, heart still tangled in every word we hadn't said. As I drove home, I didn't play music. I let the night replay in silence, but my chest, that old house of caution, felt something I hadn't let in for years. It felt safe one afternoon, maybe 4 days after the wedding. He sent me a photo of a coffee mug with a crack in it captioned, "Still useful, still beautiful." I didn't reply for hours. I just stared at the image, trying not to cry at how seen I felt. Later that night, I messaged back, "Sounds familiar." He didn't respond right away, but the next morning I opened my front door to find a small paper bag resting on my doormat inside a handmade ceramic mug, slightly imperfect, glazed in earthy greens, and a note for when you need something steady to hold, Jay. I didn't know how to describe what that gesture did to me. I didn't fall apart, I didn't swoon, I simply exhaled. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was showing up not to impress me, but to walk beside me, quietly, intentionally, without trying to turn it into something performative. I invited him over the following Saturday. Nothing dramatic. Just coffee and a walk through Forsyth Park. He showed up in a navy pullover, jeans, slightly too long, and sneakers that looked more functional than fashionable. I like that about him. He didn't try to be curated. He was just real. We walked beneath the oak trees draped in Spanish moss, talking about nothing and everything, how he used to draw maps as a kid, how I'd once dreamed of being a travel writer, even though I'd never left the South. "You have a way with words," he said as we sat by the fountain. "It's like they come from a place deeper than your voice." I looked down. Words were all I had for a long time. He didn't ask for the backstory. He just placed his hand gently over mine, a silent, "I hear you," without saying a thing. Later at my apartment, I let him see the things I never showed people: the stack of journals under my bed, the worn-out travel bag I'd kept packed for years, just in case I ever got brave enough to leave. He sat on the floor and read a few lines I'd written years ago. He didn't laugh. He didn't critique. He said, "You carry entire universes in these pages." That night, we didn't kiss. He left with a soft, "See you soon." And it stood by the window, long after his car disappeared down the street, clutching the ceramic mug like it held the last threat of my courage. But something in me had shifted, the kind of shift that doesn't come with fireworks but with trust. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't go to bed replaying all the ways I might have messed it up. I just let myself feel the softness of the day, the rhythm of something steady beginning, the delicate unfolding rhythm of something that wasn't pretending to be love, but was quietly becoming it. I held the pendant in my palm, running my thumb over the tiny imperfections in the silver. It reminded me of something I had once written in a moment of quiet beauty. Doesn't ask to be noticed. It asks to be understood. Jason didn't rush me. He just waited, like always, for me to find the words, but I didn't need to say much. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded. "You don't have to wear it. I just wanted you to have something that felt like your story, bent but never broken." I smiled, soft and real. "I think I will wear it, not because I need it, but because I'm finally starting to believe the story it tells." He looked at me, not with desire, not with admiration, but with something far more dangerous: tenderness. And that's when I realized I loved him, not in the crashing, burning way I once thought love had to be, but in the way rain loves the earth, gently, persistently, without expecting applause. "I want to be honest," I said. "I've spent a long time believing that anyone who saw too much of me would leave, because they always did. Because I thought I was too much or not enough." Jason moved closer. taking both of my hands this time. Savannah, if you had shown up in my life years ago, I don't think I would have been ready. But now I see you and I don't want to look away. I closed my eyes and let the moment hold me. The rain kept falling, and inside my chest something bloomed. Not a sudden fireworks display, but a steady kind of warmth that reached all the quiet corners. We didn't label anything that night. We didn't need. He stayed until the sky cleared and the world turned soft again. When he finally stood to leave, he paused by the door, looked back and said, "You don't have to be perfect for me to stay just open." Why? And I watched him walk down the steps, shoes splashing in puddles. And for the first time in my life, I didn't watch someone leave with fear. I watched with hope, because I knew he'd come back. But more importantly, I knew I wouldn't disappear. If he didn't, I had found myself again in the mirror in Thessalon's, in the gentle, persistent way someone had chosen me, not despite my story, but because of it. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unsure if love like this even exists, I want to invite you to share your voice here. Leave a comment telling me, "This story made me believe again." Let's turn this comment section into something beautiful, like the garden Savannah finally walked through without fear. And if this story touched something in you, subscribe to the channel not out of habit, but because here we build stories that remind you it's never too late to feel whole. Watch the video we left for you at the end. It might be the next step your heart didn't know it needed. And if you like this story, let us know in the community. Tab your opinion means the world to us, and it's where real stories begin. Because here we don't just tell love stories. We tell your kind of stories with all the mess, all the healing, all the truth, and you belong.